Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing our attention on a really chilling figure from North American folklore, the Wendigo.
Yeah, it's one that comes up a lot, but often in, well, simplified ways.
Exactly. And that's what we want to avoid. This isn't just another Monster of the Week story. Our mission today is to really get past that, the basic man-eater legend and dig into the source material. We're going to explore the Wendigo through, three different lenses based on the sources. First, as this traditional, pretty terrifying Algonquian folklore figure. Then second, as this really bizarre, speculative biological paradox, with its own proposed taxonomy and metabolism.
It is a fascinating angle, yeah.
And finally, as a powerful psychological and cultural metaphor that actually has real-world echoes.
And looking at the sources you've pulled together, what really stands out is just the sheer range. I mean, we're starting way back with oral traditions, ethnography from people like the Ojibwe and Cree.
Right, the deep historical roots.
Exactly. Then we pivot completely into these hypothetical scientific classifications. It even gets a Latin name, Homo vorax glacialis.
Which is just wild.
It is. And then we even have notes drawn from field survival guides on how to potentially deal with it. So it spans myth, speculative science, even tactical advice.
Okay, so let's start maybe with the core origin story. Because that one really hits hard, tapping into that basic fear of starvation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It usually begins with a hunter, lost, isolated, facing a brutal northern winter.
The classic setup for survival horror.
Right. And driven by sheer desperation, they resort to cannibalism. They eat human flesh.
And that's the trigger.
And that's the point of no return. In doing that, they become cursed, transforming into this man-beast figure just doomed to this endless, insatiable hunger.
So the legend itself, it's really rooted in the traditions of Algonquian-speaking peoples, right? Like the Ojibwe, Cree, Naskapi, Innu.
That's correct. It's very much tied to the geography of the North. The extreme cold, winter, the constant threat of famine, starvation. It's kind of an ecological horror story in a way.
And the physical description, it's not just monstrous, it's paradoxical, isn't it?
Deeply paradoxical. The sources consistently describe it as huge, sometimes, up to 15 feet tall.
15 feet, okay.
But at the same time, it's described as incredibly gaunt, emaciated, skeletal almost.
Yeah.
It's this giant, starving figure.
There's that account from the ethnographer Basil H. Johnston. Right, that really paints a picture.
It does. He talks about its skin being desiccated, pulled incredibly tight over the bones, the complexion ash gray, like death itself, eyes sunk deep in their sockets, and this just awful, sickening smell of decay and corruption around it.
But that thinness, that emaciation, it's not from lack of eating, is it? That's the core of the curse.
Exactly. That's the horrifying twist in the lore. Whenever the Wendigo consumes a victim, it physically grows in proportion to the meal.
So wait, eating makes it bigger?
Yes, but it doesn't satisfy the hunger. It just scales up the creature, scales up its needs. So every time it successfully hunts, the problem actually gets worse. It needs even more food next time.
So it's forever growing, but forever starving. Simultaneously gluttonous and emaciated.
Precisely. It must remain thin because its own massive size and metabolism are constantly consuming it from within unless it keeps feeding. It's a cycle of absolute, unending need.
That is... Wow, that's genuinely unsettling. And it's not just a brute either. It's cunning.
Oh, very cunning. The tribes called it the spirit of lonely places. And its creepiest tactic, probably, is that it doesn't just chase you down. It mimics human voices.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the sound of someone, maybe a lost child, a fellow traveler, anything to lure a person who's isolated away from safety deeper into the woods.
That combination, the physical horror and that predatory intelligence, you can see why they'd attribute unexplained disappearances to it, especially back in the early 20th century.
Absolutely. And the name itself, Wendigo. Yeah. One alternative translation is the evil spirit that devours mankind. Okay, which ties into another version of the lore, where it's not just a transformation, but a spirit that can possess someone. It forces them into cannibalism first, kind of priming them before the full physical change.
So this idea of a curse, whether it's spiritual or physical, that kind of leads us perfectly into that speculative biology angle, doesn't it?
It really does.
Okay, so let's switch gears. Let's go full what if and look at this speculative scientific profile laid out in some sources. They actually give it a classification, Homo vorax glacialis.
Glacial devourer man, yeah.
And notice they keep it homo. So related to humans, suggesting a mutation, maybe, not something completely alien.
Right, a divergent path. But the key, according to these sources, the absolute core of its monstrosity is neurological. It's in the brain wiring.
Okay, break that down. What's happening in its head?
Well, the hypothesis is that it retains a large prefrontal cortex, so it's capable of planning, strategy, that cunning we mentioned.
Okay, smart predator.
But there's massive targeted degeneration in the parts of the brain associated with empathy. Specifically, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC.
The VMPFC. Remind me, what does that control in us?
That's crucial for processing guilt, moral reasoning, understanding others' emotions, reining in impulses. If that's gone or severely damaged,
You'd have basically a psychopath.
Yeah.
No remorse, no connection to the victim's suffering.
Exactly. Functionally psychopathic. And this is supposedly combined with an overgrowth in the amygdala.
Which handles fear and aggression.
Right, so you get this creature that's constantly aggressive, perpetually paranoid, maybe sees everything as a threat or prey, and is utterly incapable of feeling bad about it.
Okay, wow. And then there's the hunger drive. That's chemical, isn't it?
According to the sources, yes, it's proposed that the brain is flooded with norepinephrine and dopamine.
So
Constant.
adrenaline and the reward chemical.
Kind of. It keeps the creature in a permanent state of hyperarousal, like fight or flight never shuts off. And the dopamine pathway is maybe hijacked, creating a reward signal for hunting and eating that never registers as satisfaction or fullness. The brain is essentially hardwired to never feel sated.
That's a nightmare. And this chemical drive, it fuels the physical state, the metabolism.
It has to.
Yeah.
The sources try to explain the extreme gauntness by proposing very low bone density. Makes it lighter, maybe faster.
Okay.
But the limbs and digits are elongated, specialized for moving quickly through deep snow, and those reports of unnatural jerky movements.
Yeah.
The hypothesis there is ligament detachment in later stages. Allows for these really contorted, unsettling motions, purely functional for pursuit.
And the metabolism itself. That's the central paradox again, right?
It is. It's described as hypermetabolism. It's burning through its own tissues at an incredible rate unless it's constantly feeding.
So it's literally eating itself alive if it stops eating other things.
Pretty much. And the digestive system is imagined as multi-chambered,
Right.
super efficient, designed to extract every last calorie, even from things like bone marrow and sinew. Stuff humans normally can't get much from.
Okay, this is wild. How does it get stuck in that loop? Why doesn't eating ever satisfy it?
The theory points to a specific mutation, a problem with leptin receptors.
Leptin. That's the hormone that tells your brain you're full.
Exactly. If those receptors are broken, the I'm full signal never arrives. So the more it eats, the more the body screams for food, because the signal that should shut off the hunger just isn't getting through. It's a biological trap.
An engine of endless, self-destroying hunger.
Okay.
And the cold adaptation. That detail was crazy.
Yeah, this one's really out there. So despite this incredibly high internal metabolic rate, it's burning super hot inside.
Right.
Its skin remains below freezing. It looks translucent, frostbitten. The idea is extreme capillary constriction near the surface. Shunts all the blood, all the heat deep inside. Gives it that perfect walking corpse look while being a furnace internally.
And the antifreeze heart.
That's the peak of the speculation, maybe. The sources suggest its enlarged heart might contain antifreeze glycoproteins, similar to what some Arctic fish have.
Seriously.
Yeah. The idea is this. Combined with a way to slow its metabolism way down when inactive, could preserve its tissues indefinitely in the cold. It hints at a kind of biological immortality, or at least extreme longevity, in its environment.
That's just incredible. An antifreeze heart, a broken hunger switch, a guilt-free brain. What about its senses? How does it hunt so effectively?
Sensory powerhouse, according to this profile. Olfactory bulbs, the smell centers in the brain, are supposedly massive, giving it a detection radius for, say, blood scent measured in kilometers.
Kilometers, wow. So it could track you for miles.
Easily. And its hearing elongated ear canals are proposed, designed to amplify low-frequency sounds, things like a heartbeat under snow or movement far off.
And maybe night vision, too.
Possibly. Some sources mention adaptations like a tapetum lucidum that reflective layer cats have. Makes sense for a nocturnal or deep woods predator.
Okay, last piece of this biology puzzle. Transmission. How does the curse spread in this model?
It's framed less as magic and more like a disease. Maybe a prion disease, like mad cow, spread through eating infected tissue.
Right, through the cannibalism aspect.
Or possibly even some kind of retroviral parasitosis, maybe spread not just by eating, but even through prolonged exposure. Perhaps pheromones released by the creature could trigger changes in a susceptible person?
Okay, so contagion. That idea really bridges us perfectly into the historical reality or the documented phenomenon related to the legend.
Exactly. We shift now from hypothesis to history, and what we encounter is Wendigo psychosis, which is described as a classic example of a culture-bound syndrome.
Okay, let's unpack that term for listeners. Culture-bound syndrome. What does that really mean?
It means it's a genuine mental health condition, a set of psychiatric symptoms and behaviors that is recognized, named, and understood primarily within a specific cultural context. It might look strange or inexplicable from the outside, but within that culture, it's a known phenomenon.
So for the boreal Algonquian peoples who recognized it, what did Wendigo psychosis look like?
It was characterized by this intense, overwhelming craving for human flesh, an obsession with cannibalism. But crucially, it was often coupled with an intense fear of becoming a cannibal, because they knew the stories, they knew the horrifying outcome associated with the Wendigo.
So both desire and dread.
Exactly, a terrifying internal conflict. And for the individuals experiencing it, the sources suggest the reality of this compulsion was absolute. It wasn't just a metaphor to them.
And the most cited historical case, that's Swift Runner, right, from 1879.
Swift Runner, yeah. He was a Cree trapper. His case is particularly stark and chilling because his actions apparently weren't driven by simple starvation.
What happened?
He murdered and consumed his entire family, wife, children, mother-in-law, brother.
Oh my God.
And the key detail is that this happened near a Hudson's Bay Company post where there were emergency food supplies available. He didn't need to resort to cannibalism for survival.
So why did he do it?
He confessed later, claiming he'd been possessed. Overcome by the Wendigo spirit, the psychosis. It wasn't about hunger for food. It was about this consuming, destructive, spiritual or psychological force taking him over. It really highlights the power of the phenomenon beyond just physical need.
That's deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
Now, the sources also note that this specific diagnosis, Wendigo psychosis, seemed to decrease quite sharply in the 20th century.
It did. As these Algonquian communities had more sustained contact with Western culture, European ideologies, different medical frameworks, and as lifestyles became less isolated and traditionally rural, the documented instances of this specific syndrome faded.
Right, which leads to a debate mentioned in the sources too, doesn't it, about whether it was ever real.
Yes, there's a historical debate there among anthropologists and psychiatrists. Some later researchers questioned if it was perhaps a fabrication, maybe used culturally to explain certain antisocial behaviors, or if early, perhaps naive anthropologists misinterpreted or exaggerated things they heard.
Kind of like projecting their own ideas onto it.
Potentially. But on the other side, there were credible contemporary accounts, including from indigenous people themselves, supporting its reality as a recognized affliction. The controversy itself is part of the history. Even today, the ICD-10, the International Classification of Diseases, still lists Wendigo under culture-specific disorders, but it explicitly notes that historical debate about its exact nature and legitimacy.
Okay, so regardless of its precise psychiatric classification now, the idea of the Wendigo, the symbolism, clearly has immense staying power.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a potent metaphor. It perfectly encapsulates the destructive nature of greed, uncontrolled appetite, excess, consuming everything until you destroy yourself and everything around you.
It serves as a kind of ultimate taboo, right? A moral warning against that kind of self-destructive behavior within the community.
Exactly. And if you broaden that lens, the metaphor extends way beyond just literal cannibalism. Conceptually, the Wendigo applies to any force, could be an individual, an institution, even a whole society that gets infected by this corrosive, insatiable drive for more, just endless self-aggrandizing consumption.
And some interpretations have explicitly used it that way, haven't they? To critique things like colonialism.
Yes, that's a significant interpretation in some academic and indigenous scholarship, viewing colonialism and its agents as acting like a Wendigo ceaselessly consuming land, resources, cultures, throwing the natural world and communities completely out of balance, driven by a hunger that couldn't be satisfied. It reframes that historical process through this powerful indigenous lens.
So that terrifying figure, whether it's literal myth, a historical syndrome, or this powerful metaphor,
Yeah.
It's definitely lodged itself in modern pop culture. You see versions of it everywhere.
You really do. Games like Until Dawn, mentions in Stephen King's Pet Sematary, shows like Supernatural. It's become a go-to horror trope.
Though often, the modern depictions kind of stray pretty far from the original lore, don't they? Sometimes it's just like a generic skull monster with deer antlers, or maybe just a Bigfoot-type creature.
Right. And that drift brings up a really important point, a criticism that's noted in the sources quite strongly. It's about appropriation and respect. Many of these popular horror depictions are created by non-native writers and creators, and when they take the Wendigo, strip it of its specific cultural context, its meaning, its role as a moral teaching within Algonquian societies.
And just use it as a cool-looking monster to fight.
Exactly. It risks turning a significant cultural figure into a generic villain, and worse, it can inadvertently contribute to the demonization or misrepresentation of indigenous cultures for a mass audience that maybe doesn't know the deeper background.
That's a really crucial ethical point to remember. Understanding the source matters.
It absolutely does.
Okay, let's pivot one last time to maybe the most unusual source material here, the hypothetical field guide to survival. If you were actually in Wendigo territory, what's the actionable intelligence?
Well, number one, according to these guides, is prevention. It preys on the isolated. So, rule one, avoid isolation at all costs. Stick together. Safety in numbers is paramount.
Makes sense. What else?
Scent is huge, given that extreme sense of smell we talked about.
Right, detecting blood from kilometers away.
Yeah. So scent masking is critical, using strong-smelling natural oils, maybe burning animal fat to create pungent smoke, anything to confuse or overwhelm its olfactory senses, and tied to that is noise discipline, especially low-frequency sounds. Its hearing is supposedly tuned for that. So move quietly.
Okay, so avoid being alone, mask your scent, stay quiet. What about detecting it before it finds you?
The sources suggest a few key signs. First, watch other animals. Sudden panicked flight of deer, or an unnatural silence in the forest where birds stop singing. Wildlife often senses these predators first.
Good tip.
Second, look for tracks. Not just big footprints, but ones that look wrong. Unnaturally long strides may be signs of those contorted movements.
Okay.
And third, if you had the tech, thermal imagers. Because of that hypermetabolism, even if its skin is cold, its core heat signature should be intense. It might reveal it hiding behind trees or brush when you can't see it otherwise.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, if worst comes to worst, engagement. What's the advice?
Fire. Overwhelmingly, fire is presented as the primary deterrent and weapon.
Why fire specifically, given the cold adaptation?
The idea is that while it's adapted to external cold, intense heat can still damage its tissues, denature the proteins, maybe overload its system. It's suggested it might be surprisingly vulnerable to direct, intense heat despite its frosty exterior.
Okay, and tactically, where do you aim?
Head and brainstem, that's the consistent advice. Since the core of the problem is that neurological drive, that runaway hunger signal.
You have to shut down the control center.
Exactly. Disabling the brain is seen as the only reliable way to stop that relentless predatory engine.
And after an encounter. Assuming survival, there's a warning about contagion, right?
Yes, driven by that prion or virus transmission theory. If there's any suspicion of contagion, say if someone was bitten or there was contact with remains, the recommendation is drastic. Complete incineration. Burn the remains, burn any contaminated gear, leave nothing behind.
Total decontamination.
But the field guide emphasizes something else, too. Maybe the greatest danger isn't even the physical threat or the potential contagion. It's psychological. The crushing guilt among survivors, the paranoia, the suspicion. Who might be infected? Who might turn? The fear and stress could potentially trigger the very psychosis they were trying to escape. The psychological fallout is presented as potentially devastating. Hashtag outro. You know, when you pull all these threads together, the folklore, the speculative biology, the real-world psychosis, the metaphor, the Wendigo emerges as this uniquely powerful entity, doesn't it?
It really does.
It forces us to confront some really fundamental fears. Starvation, isolation, but also, maybe the scariest one, that potential for monstrous consuming greed that exists within humanity itself. It's a myth, it's potentially a syndrome, and it's definitely a kind of ecological and social warning all rolled into one.
And some of those details we dug up from the sources are just unforgettable. That theoretical antifreeze heart, the leptin mutation, meaning eating makes it hungrier, a sense of smell measured in kilometers.
It paints an incredibly vivid picture of relentless consumption.
So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this. If the traditional Wendigo is the ultimate embodiment of that endless self-destructive consumption, what forces or systems around us today might look like they're, well, turning Wendigo?
Mm.
What operates with that same kind of insatiable, self-aggrandizing appetite, consuming resources or well-being, heedless of the imbalance it creates? Something to think about, perhaps, next time you're weighing sufficiency against excess.
A chilling thought to end on.
Indeed. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.